All right. Sorry we're a few minutes late. We had a couple technical difficulties and I had to use the bathroom and made sure we have fresh coffee. So, welcome back to another week of Litecoin Underground. I think we need to come up with a name for this because now that we're going to start doing them live, I used to do, I think I just called them like Saturday morning underground. Maybe we got to come up with a clever name, but instead of Saturday morning cartoons, I guess we'll be Saturday morning underground. Look how we're just like, I'm not saying we're cartoons, but all right. We got on today, Why Litecoin, who, if you're not following him, is just, I believe, just at W Litecoin. He's working on an avatar. I don't know why it's not coming up, but he's just a black screen. But that's all right. We're mostly here to just listen to him and go over some of the stuff that he's been posting lately. If you don't know why, well, obviously Animal's here too. Hey, Animal. Oh, now why Litecoin says his audio cut out. We'll just leave and come back. But if you don't know, even Animal didn't know this. Why Litecoin was actually the first. He and I did the first episode of the Litecoin Underground podcast. I think the plan at some point was to do it more consistently. We did I think we did an interview with Eric Voskel. We did a kind of our case for Litecoin as episode number 1. So he was one of the first guys coming into the spaces that he and I kind of connected, and that's what kind of inspired me to start this. So it's kind of coming full circle almost 3 years later since we started doing this. So let's hope he comes back. I see his avatar now, so let's try. There we
It
go.
cut out for some reason. I think maybe similar to what happened to Animal, but then I just kind of deleted myself and came back, or muted and stopped the cam and came back, and it's working now. So
Yeah, we've had to do that a little this morning. So if it happens, it happens. Technical stuff, but
and is there
okay. Well, how you doing, man? How you
doing
been?
well, thank you. I've been well. I've been on a interesting trip. I uh, live in Puerto Rico, so that's been fun the last 6 months because I've been expecting this market to break out. Although it hasn't happened yet, I still think it's coming. We can talk about, I guess, kind of the fundamental reasons first, and then I can show some charts if I'm able to share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Where's it at? Is it present?
You go down to at the bottom. You should have present.
Okay.
But yeah, if you guys, anybody who listens to the spaces or every week, I a lot of times avoid the charts and avoid the price talk. I don't know why. Like I'm probably like a little irrationally against it, and need to soften up about my no price talk stance. And why Litecoin's had kind of a similar theory to me, but he has a lot more in-depth understanding of some of the statistics around what's actually happening in markets, where I pay more. I'm thinking always more about like the real world use and growth in that sense, where he's more of the technical. I don't like to say not so much charts. I would say like I forget what the name for it is.
I would just say like
screen, by the way.
TA. Is it better now? I focus like, I wouldn't say it's purely technical. Like my main reason for any investment is usually like I have to be able to understand the value proposition. So I focus just as much on adoption and the things that we typically focus on in your spaces, but I pay attention to the macroeconomic stuff, and that's a huge key component in my understanding and why to be positioned in crypto, because I think that's kind of the major driving force uh, for prices of all risk assets, and I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, at least for now, is still like a risk asset. I think it's possible that changes in the future if you have enough monetary adoption to where, if financial assets go down in price, you could still have enough adoption in these cryptocurrencies to where they're kind of like a hedge. But right now, almost everyone buying them is not using them, or a vast majority of people. So they trade just like other risk assets. So that's why I think it's important to focus on that. And then on the fundamental side, that's like the second key piece there, like understanding the real value proposition of Bitcoin first is important. That's how I started back in like late 2016. And then from there, I got really interested in Litecoin in 2017 when the scaling debate was the talk of the entire space. Um, and that's when I started tracking Litecoin adoption, because at the time, and I don't know if you want me to get into this now, but
Yeah, go
I
ahead. I
can
mean,
just.
can you zoom in on this at all, or make it a
Oh
little
yeah, sorry, I
larger?
wasn't even paying attention.
No, that's
So
all right.
basically, yeah, I guess I can talk about this
Do a
while
little
I show
control
it.
plus there because I can't see those small.
Okay.
There we go. There now. Yeah, see, we got older
So
audience. You know.
yeah, let's see. Let's go to the chart. This is just a chart that shows Litecoin transactions in red against Bitcoin transactions in blue. Um, and like I was saying, I started paying attention to Litecoin during the scaling debate. Uh, Basically, there were two sides to this argument. I think both camps, whether you were in the large block camp or the small block camp, both of them kind of thought that Bitcoin would scale. The small blockers sort of thought that we just scale Bitcoin through credit layers, right? Sort of like gold, where you know banks and institutions maybe would hold all the Bitcoin, but then every normal person would just never actually possess it, would just transact with Bitcoin on credit layers.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that didn't make much sense, because if you really wanted Bitcoin's value proposition, right? If you wanted insurance, like a surety that you'd have protection against inflation, you would actually need to transact on chain. You'd need to like verify the quality and quantity of your money, because a custodian or third party could always inflate the paper supply, and the only have assurance that they're not doing that is by possessing it yourself. And there's also security trade-offs too with any solution with Lightning Network, right? There's some time and security trade-offs, and inevitably, even if you have a bunch of credit layers that do get adoption, like there's still going to be demand for settlement, and that will still drive fee pressure higher, such that would still warrant a second Bitcoin like chain if you had enough adoption.
Don't you think what's funny to me about the theory, and I kind of want just to highlight it because we're not always just talking to ourselves, but the mentioning of like credit layers and that banks would hold Bitcoin, which is still talked about. I mean, today there's a lot of discussion about banks. Um, could there be laws passed that allow banks to custody Bitcoin? And I think, you guys, if you follow me, you know that I talk about places like Strike and that guy from Lightspark. Like these are just banks. They may call themselves Lightning nodes or Lightning companies, but essentially that's what they're trying to do. They want to take possession. They need to take possession of the Bitcoin in order to operate a Lightning hub. And the risk is, yes, you don't know how much Bitcoin they're holding. You have no way of validating um, that the money they say they have, they actually have. And there's not a clear redemption process that if you wanted to take it back, that you'd be certain that you could do that. And I feel like that's a strange, like, we're just replicating the old system, and it seems like so many steps to just transacting money peer to peer, which is obviously the initial idea, right? Just eliminating all the trust and institutions that are involved with that. Um, it's I'm gonna about this chart. It's surprising to me is that even though SegWit came in and was supposed to increase capacity, that Bitcoin didn't increase in volume. Like, why didn't their transactions go up 3x or whatever? Right? Because the SegWit was supposed to allow for more transactions.
Yeah, I do know. I'm not sure how that works. I know at this time though that blocks were still full and fees were rising. So despite SegWit, maybe it just didn't have adoption at the time. I
Oh,
don't
could be.
100% know. Like I don't know 100% why that's happening, but I do know like if I pull up the
Yeah. Do you have like
like
average block
mempool
size?
stats. Yeah, we could look at average block size, but it's basically capped here. It'll show the pending transaction fee. Like this is 2017.
I got the same chart up as you do, by the way.
Yeah, that was the start of the bear whale market in January 2018. So it makes sense
Like
that
block
people
sizes
stop
have
the
actually
transaction.
consistently shrunk. Why would block sizes be shrinking if SegWit enabled them to be larger?
No one was using it. People were selling and got shy, I guess. They didn't want it. They don't want to play with Bitcoin anymore. You know, it was a pretty long period where people were just totally disillusioned that, people they saw a $20,000 Bitcoin and then it went down to like whatever, 1,000 or something. And the magic was gone, man. People just weren't involved anymore. They didn't want to be involved. It wasn't cool anymore.
See, I have a totally different chart than you there. When you pulled up average block size, mine looks totally different. Oh, you got transactions up still. You still got transactions up.
This is transactions. If I click back to it, regardless though, I think if you just pull up like the fee chart, that's a pretty good indication that blocks are full. I don't know like the exact technical reasons with regards to like why SegWit didn't increase actions that I can go through, or how exactly these transactions were like batched or aggregated. I'm not the best for asking about those things. I generally just track fee level, and I'm assuming when the fee level rises that blocks are full, right?
Right.
People aren't going to pay more than they have to get their transactions confirmed. But basically the point of this is that you can, and I can show this on the mempool stats, but every time Bitcoin fees started to rise, that's when you generally saw an increase in Litecoin transactions. And I think it's important to, for me at least in my head, to try to differentiate speculative transactions. So transactions that are just moved like to and from exchanges by people buying the coins to trade them, versus the economic transactions. Because at some points you'll see transactions in Litecoin spike, but they don't correlate to like real economic activity. But every time Bitcoin fees rise, I've noticed that like most of the transactions gained from the Litecoin network are real economic transactions. So my whole thesis behind this, and it dates back to 2017 about this block scaling, Bitcoin scaling debate, was that instead of getting larger blocks or just scaling through credit layers, what the most likely path for the market to go to was just towards another Bitcoin chain, like a substitute Bitcoin chain, because that's the closest thing you could get to Bitcoin without sacrificing any sort of security or price, right? Like you wouldn't have to make any trade-offs. You just have to exchange between two monies. I thought that was the path of least resistance for the market to trend towards. And over time, that's like exactly what we've seen. So like in early 2017, you could just look at this Litecoin against Bitcoin transaction graph. Like in March, that's when Bitcoin fees first started to rise, or blocks became full, and Litecoin gained quite a bit of transactions. But there was also a decent chunk of speculative transactions in here because, it was one of the few coins listed on Coinbase. It had the SegWit hype, and so a lot of this is speculative activity too. But then late 2017, that's when we saw Bitcoin fees go to $50, and that's also when Litecoin transactions spiked. That's when you kind of really get a sense of how much economic activity actually came from, because speculative activity kind of trends significantly down when price goes down 90%, but the or the people that remain are on a daily basis, at least for Litecoin. There tends to be almost zero speculative interest, at least now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think during that time, I would look at it too. It was the coin most widely used to move money between exchanges, right? It was people who were, I mean, I think anybody who didn't wasn't trading or wasn't around back then doesn't know like the Wild West nature of it, and that there weren't like exchanges that you couldn't, now like you can't join Binance if you're inside the US. There are a lot more barriers today than there used to be. And there were all these exchanges you could just sign up and join. And so people were moving, they were arbitraging like crazy because you'd have like Poloniex was super low volume. And gosh, I remember what was one there's one in Australia that went out of business that I remember people would use a lot for that arbitrage, make 5%. And so you needed to move money quickly, and they did it via Litecoin a lot. So that was
Solana
certainly
didn't
a big
exist
part
back
of it.
then, right?
What's that?
Solana didn't exist, and Ethereum was also kind of slow and expensive.
Yeah. That, I mean, I think the other ones like Ripple was another one that got a lot of. It was widely, because the big thing is you had to have it on the exchange, right? It had to be widely available. And I think it's funny because I think that is a microcosm of what's happening today, right? Like people were looking for a coin that was everywhere, that they could move inexpensively, move it fairly quickly. It would reliably work. They wouldn't have to like, oh crap, the network's down. There's a massive congestion, and I'm just stuck in purgatory. So that's they gravitated to Litecoin, and I think the same thing's beginning to happen in the real world. And when we had Bit Refill in it, and I could go in, if you don't mind me sharing for a second to kind of reinforce this why Litecoin. I brought some stuff up.
Those Bit Refill charts.
Well, I had let me just do a window here. I just got Litecoin space up. Wonder if I boot you out of here. Oh yeah, I get control. Well, I got the same numbers, right? But we talk about stuff like BitPay all the time, and what it represents to me is that people, when they're given choices. They can choose Litecoin, Bitcoin, stablecoin, Ethereum, Doge. Oh, that's for payouts. Sorry, for payments. Bcash. They get these options, and they're choosing Litecoin for those same reasons that people were choosing to move money between exchanges back then. It's everywhere. It's inexpensive. It's simple. It's reliable. Not to say the other ones aren't, but there's just been a natural gravitation towards it. And I think the availability is probably the number one thing, that it is everywhere. On ATMs, I pulled up, I think we've all seen this chart before. This might be an old chart, but it's the only one I could find that outside of Bitcoin, Litecoin's the most common coin, Litecoin, even over Ethereum. So I think this number is really old because it looks like the same chart that's never changed, but it gives you an idea. Like anybody can use it. It's available to them everywhere. And I think that's where my bullish case comes in, is this circular economy it's self-reinforcing, right? If I'm a business and I want to know what are people using, I'm always going to add Litecoin because it's number one, number two, number three everywhere. I mean, even a Bit Refill.
And it's often just as easy as checking a box, right? Like there's no barrier to entry once you have.
Yeah, Bitcoin, very little work involved. I mean, this is Bit Refill's numbers to see. Again, during an era where there's no price appreciation, if anything, prices continue to go down for Litecoin. So there's nobody saying like, oh, I just made a bunch of money, I'm going to go spend it. These are people that are using it as a tool and nothing more, which is encouraging. It gives you that foundational, I feel like there's a floor value to something, and it starts at where there's utility. And so 84 million coins, or obviously there's still constriction to supply because there's a lot of holders, and we'll talk about that a bit too in your mining stuff. But if people continue to use it, that leads to a circular economy. It's that self-reinforcing thing that, well, every merchant's going to accept it because it's the number one remittance coin, right? And then once they're accepting it, they start to think, well, why shouldn't I just pay my employee? If my employees are okay using it, they can buy stuff at my store. Maybe I'll pay them in Litecoin if they want. As my local currency starts to collapse around me, right? And that's where like the stable coins, it's kind of this, I think stable coins are that Trojan horse. They get people used to using something non-local. Then eventually government controls come in, like we've talked about on Wednesday, that if they can't tax their citizens directly anymore, they're going to shut down the stable coin networks or these hosts, and then people will be left with, okay, well, what do I have left? I have real cryptocurrencies, and the ones that are available to me are Litecoin, Bitcoin, and Ethereum, and Litecoin is much easier to use than the other two, right? So that's my entire thesis in like 80 seconds.
Robbie was saying that Litecoin's volatility is less than gold's. And that's one reason why people choose to transact in it, because they'll know that their value is going to be more stable. And I think that's an important aspect because, yeah, Bitcoin's core use case as a medium of exchange isn't really living up to its promise, right? We're seeing that the block size restrictions are causing fees just to be out of reach of most people. And well, Litecoin is still fulfilling its promise as a medium of exchange. It's still able to serve the community. And I mean, yeah, for sure, it's not performing as well as most of us here would like, but its price is still stable. And that, that lack of volatility makes it so that it's something that people can depend on. They can sleep well at night. They know that it's not going to go to zero, right? Which can't be said for a bunch of other stuff like Solana, whose network goes down like twice a month or something.
So I'm just going to show this, and I'll hand it back over to you. Why? But this was the around the world Litecoin. Now he included Litecoin, Doge, and Dash, but when we dove into the statistics, this was probably 90% Litecoin. And to see this significant chunk in every single continent, this is like Binance Pay in a lot of these places is huge. But if you take them into just cryptos or like non-centralized entities, it starts to look very significant at that point. So, all right, I'll stop hogging.
For sure, yeah, and I think that's important to know, like the geographic use. I find that a lot of the speculative chains, right, that are their primary use case is different types of speculative tokens. Really, like I don't want to call them Ponzi's, but that's kind of what they are, right? Like the Solana meme coin hype this cycle was primarily driven by 100% speculation, like almost zero utility, and that kind of speculative activity can leave overnight. And so it's very hard for me to like position in something like that, not knowing where the future demand would come from. And as soon as that hype cycle dies, what happens to the underlying chain? It has to go find a new use case constantly. And I think it's interesting to look at the proof of stake kind of chains that have gotten so much hype through these cycles. And you kind of touched on Litecoin being used as this coin in 2017 to be sent between exchanges. And I think really the whole altcoin casino that's always existed was denominated in Bitcoin in 2017. Like every altcoin exchange had Bitcoin trading pairs, and that's partially what drove up fees. And then you saw Litecoin being used to be sent between exchanges. And then the whole altcoin market kind of just moved on top of these proof of stake layer ones. And so you saw the rise of Ethereum, all these Ethereum competitors when Ethereum fees rose, right? Like in 2021, so many stake chains did super well because Ethereum fees, gas fees went to like $100 plus, and you couldn't any longer like mint different types of tokens to speculate on Ethereum. So like Cardano, Solana, even Avalanche. I think Avalanche is layer 2, but a lot of these things went up like 50, 100x. And it's just because the demand in this economic environment was so driven towards speculation of random things because there's so much excess money floating around. But that to me won't continue for very much longer. And so Litecoin's super interesting because it fits my kind of core expectation to the future, where we're going to move out of this speculative, crazy environment towards an economic environment where like censorship resistance and protection from inflation is going to be much more apparent in regular people's lives. And because Litecoin already has these established network effects, like it's poised to really grow. And if I share my, I don't know if
You should be able to
it's
again.
on here. Okay,
But
I'll
you got me on
this.
you got us on the screen.
Oh,
You got to
it's
change.
still on there. Oh, okay. Is it still streaming?
Yeah, I can hide it and then bring it back up.
Okay. If it's up here, like this is probably the most important chart for
Here,
valuing.
click the full screen thing in there. The top
Yeah.
right corner. I can't see.
So network value to transaction ratio, this is the adjusted one. I think adjusting this is really important because it takes out all the like runes and ordinals activity. I think something happened to Litecoin's blockchain statistics in 2022. Maybe it was the launch of MWeb, which like skewed the data quite a bit. If you look at on it, shows Litecoin sending like 70% of its market cap over the last 24 hours, which isn't actually real.
Yeah, I think I can
It's not
explain that
realistic.
actually. I can explain that. BitInfo charts in particular has a bug. It has a problem. If you go look at like the rich list, I don't know if are you paused? Oh, okay. If you go look at the rich list, there's a bunch of addresses that are like right now they're probably populating addresses in the 80,000 range because that's MWeb. So it's tracking that MWeb block. So every 2.5 minutes, it's saying 80,000 are moving here, 80,000 are moving back, 80,000 are moving here, and it's creating a unique address. So actually, the rich list shows a number higher than 84 million. And I've shown, just to be clear, I actually sent this out to David Burkett and was like, I don't know, just heads up, this is showing something weird. I discovered this like a year ago, and it's nothing that's wrong with Litecoin. It's just the way they're tracking it. So that's probably why you're having the volume issues. Is it's probably considering every MWeb block as moving real value.
For sure. Yeah. That is important. The adjusted stats do that through Masari. You can check there. But
so
network value
is net. What is this? NVT. What is this?
Yeah, so just value to transaction ratio. A lot of people have compared this to like a price earnings multiple for stocks. It's how you get kind of sense of if blockchain is overvalued. Basically, it's just comparing the market cap to the adjusted total transaction volume sent on chain for every 4-hour period. Each data point represents how much volume was sent relative to its market cap. The lower, the more undervalued. So like the last 24 hours, September 27th, yesterday, it was 44.39. So basically, the transaction volume for that 24-hour period was equal to 44 times that time. The adjusted transaction value times 44 would be the market cap. So basically, the higher, the more overvalued; the lower, the more undervalued. And if you separate,
how did you separate that? Is that something you had to do in Masari?
No, you just what I am doing in my head is like separating economic versus non-economic. So if you look at these charts, generally like for Bitcoin, Ethereum, any chain that you can pull up these stats for, you'll see like in the bull market of 2017, the NVT ratio went down a ton. Like it going down is during a bull market where price is going up. There's more coins being traded. But my point that I wanted to make is if you see this trending down where price is going sideways and in most of the network activity is economic, that's very different from history. And it suggests that despite almost no transaction activity, this network is very undervalued. So I would expect when price breaks out, this would head even lower as speculative activity picks up. But we've never really seen such a low adjusted NVT ratio when price is not going up. So
could you pull up like another coin just as a comparison, just to kind of give us?
Yeah. So like if we look at Bitcoin here,
this is Masari, by the way. Are you a paid Masari member, or is this available to the general public?
You can pull it up. I'm pretty sure you have limited access if you don't pay for it, but you can still get most of the data for free. Anyways, over the last 5 years, notice price has been going up, but this adjusted MVT has also been rising. So that just shows Bitcoin has this huge speculative premium. And I would say
10x Litecoin. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and a lot of the activity happening on Bitcoin is just money moving around, like super large value transfers, right? Like the German government was moving billions of dollars of Bitcoin to sell it.
Right.
You know, Michael Saylor has been moving billions of dollars to buy coins and put them at Coinbase custody or whatever. So this to me tells like a real what's happening with Bitcoin. It didn't always work this way. Early on, if I could go back to 2016, but I won't go back there now. You did see a pretty low adjusted NVT ratio, and you did see a lot of adoption, right? Like early on, Bitcoin was used at Silk Road, and it started as this medium of exchange. And eventually, as price kept going up, the narrative had to follow price. And so what you saw was this development from a medium of exchange to then this, you know, fictitious worldwide global reserve currency narrative where governments were all going to buy it. But I think once it loses its monetization, it's very vulnerable to significant price declines whenever the speculative activity kind of goes away. So what's nice?
Could you back up to all real quick? I'm just curious. Could you hit the all button there for?
Yeah, it's kind of messed up because
looks
early
like
on
it's plateaued for a while. Oh, all right.
I can just select like a date from 2015.
I do like 2016 or something like that. Yeah.
I think it limits the number of years you can go, but this is 2016. It's similar to where Litecoin is today. So like in 2016, kind of before it was actually more overvalued than Litecoin is today. Next run in 2017. The adjusted NVT ratio was somewhere around 70.
July of that's right before SegWit, right?
I think I don't know when Bitcoin implemented SegWit, but this was already during the bull market where there was a lot of activity happening on the chain, and price had already rallied from like $200 to 3,000.
Right.
So this to me is a lot of speculative coins moving back and forth. There's a real parabolic run happening. But the monetary adoption was lower than Litecoin's is today in 2016 for Bitcoin. And so it just shows how undervalued it is relative to its current monetization. And I think the reason for that is there's so many Bitcoin salespeople, institutions pitching this product that's created a lot of momentum. And because prices gone up perpetually forever, people tend to think that it's going to continue and everything's going to go to zero against Bitcoin. But it's really just this psychological effect because of past price action. I've talked with a lot of like normal people and they feel safer just buying Bitcoin. But to me, knowing the reality of what Bitcoin is, its monetization limit, and the fact that, you know, the more people that are in it, the for speculative reasons, the higher risk. It kind of has the opposite effect of what most people assume. Like just because price has gone up doesn't mean it's going to continue. And if you're buying it for that reason and price starts to go down, you're more likely to sell. You're not going to be like a believer. So I think this can reverse pretty hard in the future.
Yeah, there was a post the other day, some Bitcoiner, and she was like, "Oh, I got my friend to buy Bitcoin. Finally got her after years. Got her to buy Bitcoin a couple of years ago, and she just messaged me, told me she sold, and she was happy. She doubled her money or something." And this person's like, why does this keep happening? Or like, what? It's like, well, that's what you're selling them, right? That's what you told them. They're going to get rich. So when they get rich, they're just going to leave. Like what? They're not seeing any other purpose to this stuff at all.
A lot of people don't have a problem with the banking system as it is, right? Or they don't see the issue with inflation
Right.
and the national debt ballooning to unmanageable levels.
For sure.
I think a lot of like us crypto people are worried about that, right? Are worried about the national debt and the implications of a soft or a hard default on that debt, right? Uh, a hard default being where we just stop making those interest payments,
Mhm.
and a soft default being we just keep printing more money, right?
For
And
sure. Yeah. And
we value,
they,
yeah, the
they
currency.
just keep printing more money. Every historical example of this is the government never really defaults honestly. They default dishonestly.
Well, I mean, so you heard about
Um,
the IMF report that came out this week, right? About how it's starting to see some of the same warning signs in the states that it's seen in countries where their economy has failed and gone into hyperinflation. Same sort of patterns of inflated government spending. Um, and I think it has a lot to do with, I guess. Well, I mean, that the interest payments on the national debt have exceeded those of your spending on defense. Um, and what happens when your interest payments exceed all of your other government payments, right? Like,
for sure. Yeah.
what do you guys are going to do? What do we,
There's
like?
no way out. And
There's no way out,
I
right?
I agree.
Well,
There, you
cutting
also
spending.
notice the social and cultural trends that are very similar to countries that have gone through very bad economic problems, potentially hyper. And the same thing, right? Like
Uh,
population's very divided.
I mean, a
You
lot of
see
people are
kind of
still like in la la land. A lot of people just don't even see the writing on the wall, and they're just living their lives, going to work every day, buying groceries, doing all the stuff that they normally do, and um,
They're probably
I
blissfully ignorant.
and I guess because yeah, it's like it's a lot. It's not something that's really openly spoken about, right? On these, on the mainstream media, people are talking about how the economy is booming and how things are going well these days, um, and they're kind of ignoring
yeah,
that fact, right? They're glossing over it. And I think
yeah.
it's when people like the IMF start to bring it up, maybe they'll start taking it more seriously. Maybe it will be a topic of discussion. Maybe something will happen. Maybe someone will fix it. But I mean,
Well,
what's
mass psychology is interesting because most people don't pay attention to an issue until it starts directly affecting their lives, but then it's usually too late, right? With our problems financially, it's like we've been glossing them over and giving ourselves like this artificial sort of short-term stimulus to avoid like major problems. It always culminates in some sort of real disaster scenario, right? If you kept giving yourself painkillers every time you got sick and you had cancer, eventually the strength of the painkillers wouldn't be enough. Eventually, you'd realize you have real problems, and by that point, maybe your cancer's like stage 4, and
Mhm.
you're going to try to treat it. I think that's the same type of thing we've been doing economically, financially with these like, especially in the U.S.
Yeah.
Just glossing over the problem, not treating it, and now we're to a point where it's kind of able to avoid severe consequences. And yeah, that's why I think people should uh, pay attention to this space, not for the speculative reasons, but for the value proposition that these chains can provide. Already see people, despite us, like we kind of treats this as a casino, like whole market, Coinbase. This most people are just using it to make money. There are people in second and third world countries that do value, and I think it's in our communities, much people are using these, Bitcoin or Litecoin to survive. Like they were funding the Myanmar revolution with cryptocurrency, right? Like in Venezuela, people need to get money into their country. Black markets do represent like 15-20% of global GDP, and people depend on those for survival, for food, and um, to be able to save some money. So
I mean, also if you consider like their use of Western Union, right? Initially, Bitcoin was replacing Western Union in some places, but now obviously the fees are too high for that to be sustainable.
for sure, yeah, and I could touch on Grant's point originally. His like whole thesis was around adoption, and I think you saw stark change over the last like few years where Litecoin started to pass everything else or gain a significant share on these merchant processors. Really, to me, it's because Bitcoin fees were at least low value transactions. I don't have the pay
So
stats, but
you're breaking up a little bit. Just I don't know if you're putting an antenna on your computer or
my
something.
bad.
How you're gonna fix that? But it
Is
could
it
be
still
me. I
breaking up?
feel like I'm a little my connection hasn't been great this morning. But
If
sorry,
you
go
got a
ahead.
VPN running,
I don't have it running now.
right.
Is it still breaking up?
You're good. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a little bit choppy, so
Okay.
just letting you know. So repeat what you were saying. I'm sorry if you even remember now.
I was going to make a point on what you were talking about originally with respect to BitPay stats, these merchant processor stats, and why Litecoin's grown so significantly over the last, I'd say like 5 years.
Mhm.
It's partially because it's available everywhere. It had some sufficient network effects. I think really the last 6 years, people didn't use Bitcoin because fees were at least high enough to price out low value transactions. And if you look at BitPay stats, like majority of payments or average value of payments for Litecoin is like 50 to 60 bucks. And Bitcoin fees have hovered above $1, like $1 to $4, even during the bear markets. And so that's too expensive for people to use for those low value payments online. So they have used Litecoin, and that's kind of just had the ability to grow over time for the last 4 or 5 years, with Bitcoin fees sustainably above $1. And if you look at Bitcoin average payment value on BitPay, it's like $1,000. So despite Litecoin being monetized and doing like almost as many transactions as Bitcoin, it's not really resulting in the pricing because low value payments aren't worth that much in terms of market cap as high value payments. Like $100 transaction is worth 100 $1 transactions. If you think about it from a market cap perspective, right? Like $100 is $100. So Litecoin's doing a ton more $50 payments, but it takes 20 $50 payments to equal the average $1,000 payment that's happening on Bitcoin.
Right.
But what I'm thinking for this bull market is that if we do see a rally into the end of the year or early next year above all-time highs, because fees have already been for a day or two like $100, which has never happened in a bull market before all-time highs were broken. Like if you look at, I can pull this up here, Bitcoin transaction fee.
Crazy, right? I don't know if you're. I can't. I'm not hearing you at all right now. I Litecoin.
Yeah, it looks like we lost him. But it's true to his point. I mean, fees have been increasing consistently. We saw some crazy fees during the last halving.
I think he's still talking.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remove him. Maybe that'll get him across. Should I kick him? I don't know if I kick him. Anyway, maybe he'll notice now. No, he's still just looking at his computer. I can see it. All right, I'm gonna. I don't know if I should kick him or not.
That was probably a good time to talk about our sponsor, Cake Wallet.
Yeah, why not?
Got,
well, we hope we get him back.
If you haven't used Cake Wallet already, we highly recommend it. It's my favorite mobile wallet, hot wallet. Do a whole bunch of cryptocurrencies on there.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
Integration is coming.
Yeah, I'm gonna kick him because he's totally into his element right now. Oh, he's gonna be like, "What the heck?" Hang on a second. This is what live is all about, anyway. It's fine. People expect this.
Yeah.
Let me message him. No, yeah. I actually used Cake Wallet just recently to buy a gift card. I had to get my dishwasher broke.
Oh yeah,
So very typical middle America thing to have happen, right? It's just
just clogged up or what? Just stopped working.
I don't know. I think it was, I thought it was if you want to get into it, I thought it was a water pump because no water was getting put into the dishwasher when we'd start it, the cycle. So I went and got a new
Okay.
water pump. I put it on and it still didn't work. So I think it was something with like the motherboard or whatever, not properly signaling the device to kick on. And I was like, I don't know enough to get into all that. So I'm just going to get rid of it. And it was a new one was like $400, where a plumber to come fix your dishwasher's like $150 just to show up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
So we
yeah.
were like, let's just go get a new one. So I don't know where I was going with that. Oh yeah, that's
Good
what I used. I
refill.
went and bought.
Or did you?
I used my Litecoin to get a gift card on
Right.
Cake Wallet to buy a dishwasher, which was kind of nice. You know,
Mm.
it's pretty easy. And I've been doing stuff at my house. I used a little bit of it. I had a little remainder after that to buy some. I'm doing work on the outside of my house, fascia and stuff, which is crazy expensive, man. I my first jobs out of college, I um, worked at 84 Lumber, which was like you guys had them in Canada, I think. It was like a lumber yard. It was a very
Okay.
exciting job, but cost of stuff back then was, I'm talking about late 2000s, mid to late 2000s,
Hmm.
pre Hurricane Katrina. It was like, I mean, maybe a quarter of the cost. I mean, one piece of aluminum, 12 feet long, 6 inches, is $22 for the stuff that goes around. So, I got a bunch to do. You're like, God, man, you can't make mistakes. You're like, if I make a bad cut, I'm throwing $20 down the toilet.
Yeah.
You're like being extra paranoid about everything. But I don't know if he's going to come back. I do want to get into his stuff about the mining volume. I've found that to be the most interesting thing. So he's been tracking miner reserves and like holder coins.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if he's trying to get back in. He has not messaged me at all, so I'm not sure what's going on. But
Weird.
anyway, he has shown, and maybe I can find his posts. We can just talk about him instead of actually having him here. But he talks about minor reserves, and over the course of the last 6 years, 7 years since 2017, miners have been slowly selling off their reserves on Litecoin specifically, and I think he even has the Bitcoin statistics. So I'm trying to find. Here we go. Let's pull this up. I did that. So, oh, here he came back.
Damn, I don't know what happened. I was talking to myself for a bit.
I know you were. I saw the thing moving around, and I was like, he doesn't know that he's gone. So I don't know. You got real choppy, and then we lost everything, and you couldn't hear us either. But I was pulling up.
Yeah,
I guess while I've got it up, you can maybe
yeah, I can
talk
talk
through
about
a little
this.
bit.
So I was trying to like give hindsight analysis to why price has struggled. So I was looking at okay, who's the like primary marginal seller in this market? Really, you have long-term holders that historically behave by accumulating and selling into strength, usually above all-time highs. And then you have miners who are kind of forced sellers month to month because they have to pay their expenses. Plus, miners are sort of just individuals too, and they're speculators. Um, and so they have these reserves that they hold on to. Mining to me is just another way of buying, but you definitely notice a trend where miners will hold on to coins, especially in Bitcoin, and then start offloading those coins as price goes up. But they tend to not be as strong of hands as the long term holders. But Litecoin miner reserves is interesting because we're at levels lower than any time in history, really, since like 20. It's lower than 2015 levels.
Wow.
Miners have sold more coins from their reserves with Litecoin than any time in history these last couple of years. I think they're down like 85, 90%. So to me, that kind of explains why the price has not been able to increase, because despite the growing transactional demand at low value ranges, miners offloaded like 10 million coins, which is like almost, it's like 15% of the circulating supply.
Why do
It's
you
a
think
huge,
that is? Do you have a theory on that at all?
yeah, I think honestly, when looking at the pair charts, like LTC against BTC or LTC against ETH, I think people have been mining Litecoin because it's profitable, and I think a lot of the miners have given into the Bitcoin maxi kind of thesis, and so I think they've just been selling for Bitcoin because
Right.
they see the price action not doing much, like most people, and because it's been such extended consolidation, they've kind of given up hope and just thrown in the towel.
So they're selling their Litecoin, their Doge, and now their Bells for Bitcoin.
I think so, and
that's a wild strategy. Because yeah, if you take like an L9 they have now versus like an S21, the L9 is going to generate something like $25 worth of profit, or maybe even more today, and the S21 is only going to net you like $6 or $7 profit. So per watt, your script miner is like 3x what your SHA-256 miner is giving you. So
yeah,
I mean,
so you actually get more by mining Litecoin and selling it.
Right. Yeah. Which is pretty interesting. And I wonder if that trend's going to continue.
I think at some point sellers reach an exhaustion. Reach exhaustion, right? They only have so many coins to sell. It's down 90% or so. They can only sell 10% more.
Do you have the full chart from 2017 down? I only had the one that was like the last.
Yeah, you can pull it up on TradingView. I can share it if it
Yeah,
works.
you try. You got it at the ready. Well, I think I did some like quick math when you shared that, because I want to say it was like I was trying to figure out, so we had the halving in 2023. So in 2019 to 2023, we had, that was 12.5, right? So it means 12.5% of the blocks of the coins were mined during that time. Let me do some math, which means 84 times 0.125. That's how many million were created in that era. Oops, hang on a minute. That was just that one stretch. So 10.5 million were created in that halving. And then, or in that era, I guess we'll call it. And if we take 2017 to 2019, because that's half of the previous 4-year run, there were the same thing, 10.5 million created, because it was double the amount, but half the time, right? Are you guys following me so far? And then 2023 to today, even if we just say a year of blocks, so a quarter of the ham is going to, hang on. I'm going to figure this out. You got to trust me that this is right. So divided by 4. So another 1.3 million have been minted in the last basically year. Let's say 1.5 to be. He got kicked off again?
Looks like it.
Yeah, every time I try to share my screen, it doesn't work. But I don't know what you're saying last up on my screen. Basically,
this is a you problem, I think.
StreamYard, or it's been a while. Anyways, there's a peaked at like 13.5 million coins.
And Mike is wrecked, bro.
Yeah, you're having trouble. So Market Watch is what you use?
No.
Send me a link. Send me a link if you have a link to the page you're looking at. Yeah, even your mic sounds like scratchy, like you have a bad connection.
Yeah, I'm getting the same feedback. I haven't had problems with my internet past, but it could be messed up. I sent you a TradingView link on Twitter.
TradingView is what you use? I don't use TradingView. Do I have to sign up for it? I probably do, right? Yeah. Sorry, I probably should.
I could just screen.
TradingView is the best. Yeah. And it's pretty limited for free, and it's quite expensive if you want to really use to its potential, but most people say it's worth
But
it.
but I can look at this for. All right, let's try this. I'm able to find the minor reserves on here.
Yeah, I sent you a screenshot, so you could just pull that up.
Oh, did you? Okay.
But yeah, we've had multiple halvings, so 2 halvings since 2017. So like daily block reward has halved twice. So daily issuance for miners to sell is like 75% less than it was in 2017, and miner reserves are down 80% since then as well. So assuming transactional demand increases, these go to new all-time highs, you reach an inflection point where that, you almost have no sellers in the market, and demand and transactional demand, which will push up price significantly, right? If average transaction values go up 10x, then once price breaks out, people will pay attention to it, and you'll have some news. Maybe people will figure out what this actually is, and people tend to chase what's going up. So,
Well, here's
yeah, it's
that.
reached
So
such an extreme point.
I can't see in here. Okay, so the number, if we look even just from here, that might be the best thing to look at. But if I take from 2017, since that's where my math is coming in, this looks like about 13 million, 13 to 14 million coins are being held by miners, and they've sold 11. Let's say 11. Yeah, just 11. I guess my number was a little bit off. So that means since 2017, miners mining plus what they've sold is about 33.5 million Litecoin, which is pretty wild. So right now, so if I look at that, this is my nerd. Are you ready for me to be a nerd? Let's go. Let's follow the logic here. So we're talking 7 years. Wait. So they sold 4.78 million coins per year. And now they're only creating 84 5 and this whole, so now they're only creating 1.3 million a year. So that means less than a third, less than a quarter of the amount of coins they have had at their disposal are leaving. So essentially, and even if you look at where the halving came in, right? They sold off before the halving, and then it looks like they reinvigorated for a while, and now they're really dumping hard. And we've got, I'm trying to do the math here. If they continue at the 4.78 million per year, this will be gone in 7 months or 6 or 7 months. So by the time we see March 2025, that number may be close to zero.
Yeah, and like the key point here is like the market's absorbed all that selling pressure. Price is still making higher lows. If people, the small community that's still speculating on it, continue to add, like I, qualitatively experience or anecdotally experienced people are, right? There's a core group of believers, and transactional demand increases. Eventually, price is forced higher. It's just in these types of speculative environments, you have a huge amount of people entering in these extremely restricted supply type of coins. The potential is pretty enormous for a rapid, like almost vertical price rise. Because if the situation I'm describing actually transpires, increase of orders of magnitude in terms of transaction size and number of transactions, the price has to follow. So it doesn't seem crazy to me. I know people make fun of like Masters charts, but given the fundamental situation we're in, the macro picture, and the supply demand dynamics within Litecoin, it's entirely possible to see this asset go up like 100x in a short amount of time, if all those conditions are met. So I know people don't like price talk, and people use historical TA to kind of try to understand where price might go. I think the only people that really understand this are like the fundamental analysts, and I don't see much talk about it outside of myself.
Trying to find some of your other stuff you've been
Probably
putting on, because that's the other part. Again, maybe you can try and share. I can't imagine you're sounding much better now, but if you were to lay out kind of that, I guess people will call it, I don't know, call it a squeeze, but what happens either with the ratio or the price, with volume, and what is it, the RSI?
you have different types of indicators that I use. I'm hesitant. I just closed TradingView. That's probably why the connection improved.
Oh my
It
God,
might
yeah.
take too much data or something.
RAM. Yeah.
Or RAM. Yeah, on my computer.
Can you take some? I guess you can't take screenshots, but
here, let me try to close everything else real quick, and then.
Yeah. You need to buy a new computer if you're gonna live stream from now on.
Yeah, I didn't realize this was a problem because I've done it in the past, but it never created an issue. So let me try it one more time. If it doesn't work, whatever.
You had a post yesterday and piqued my interest that transactions did spike on Litecoin recently, and I'm not really sure why.
They just spiked yesterday, right when Bitcoin fees started. I think some of it was like ordinal transaction volume, maybe a tiny bit, because the median transaction value declined a little, but it's the same effect that just happened a few months ago when Litecoin transactions increased by 100% during this spike in the fee level, and we saw a 25% increase in transactions yesterday after Bitcoin price rallied and the mempool started to fill up. So I think that will hold. It's just a matter of how big of a mania I think we get this crypto cycle. But I think it's going to be pretty extreme. And if we see 100K Bitcoin, I think it's almost guaranteed that fees will rally to new highs, and Litecoin should gain that.
Yeah, I think there was some weird blocks yesterday too. Fees went up. Overall, I look at transactions on Bitcoin all the time. I feel like I look at mempool. I'm just interested in it. I'm of the belief that the mempool is going to completely clear out on Bitcoin. As crazy as that sounds, because if you look at the majority of the transactions on Bitcoin today are ordinal transactions. Like surprisingly, like I would say 30% are maybe monetary transactions, and that number's been dropping. The mempool is clearing out, even despite the fact that hash rate's dropping. So blocks are coming slower than they're supposed to. And there's been, there's a little green line. There's a line that kind of shows you where, I guess I'll pull this up. Why not? This little chart here will tell you, like, if it's above the line, then you're filling blocks up faster than you're emptying them, basically, is the best way to put it. This is kind of the par value. If you stayed right here, Bitcoin could handle all those transactions. And if you zoom out on this is kind of, let's take like a year. It looks pretty, pretty normal. If we go back, if you go back to, like, what the heck is going on here? My mouse doesn't work. Let's say we go back 3 years, so we capture ordinals. You can see, like, this went off the charts high, literally, when ordinals were first spiking, or last summer. So before the ordinals, post ordinals, this is all ordinal volume. But even with that, you're starting to see this number. It may seem slight, but I tell you, I watch this consistently. These numbers are coming in a lot more commonly, where almost nothing is incoming. And I'm convinced it's because the narrative has been, don't use it, sit on it. And people are choosing to just not even bother. They have better options now. So if they're going to do monetary transactions, they're choosing stable coins or Litecoin. And yeah, that's kind of where my view is. I don't see it as spillover. This is where I'll disagree with you. There is spillover that comes from Bitcoin. Sure. They start there, they come to Litecoin, but they don't go back. people don't vacillate back and forth. If they're going to use it for the spending purpose, they're going to just stop even bothering checking Bitcoin at some point. It's like, well, who cares? I know it's going to be cheaper, and Litecoin works every time. It's never let me down. That's where I think that in the short term, yes, stable coins are a Trojan horse. Bitcoin's a Trojan horse that bring people to using Litecoin.
Yeah, I would agree to some extent. I just look at what I see has garnered adoption every single time through the last 10 years. And I think the value proposition is so similar to Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's just more, it has that like brand name. It's recognized by like almost everyone in the world. People
Right.
don't really know what Litecoin even is. So yeah, they come to Bitcoin, and then if they stay in cryptocurrency, I think they find it.
Speaking of brand name stuff, sorry to interrupt. I'm a I just came out as a script maxi a couple weeks ago. I've got my, I don't know if you can see this. I got this shirt Kyle made for me. See that?
Yep. Doge, Bell, and Litecoin. Yep.
Exactly. In order of their creation, right? So, and if you want it, it's at the 84 million shop. He made it just for me, but you can order it from there. Anyways, yeah, what are your thoughts on Doge? Because that has brand power. That's got a lot of people. Everybody knows what Doge is, right? It's very polarizing too. A lot of people don't like it, and it's changed. It's like the community has changed since since Elon, right? It used to be a very well. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad community now, but if you went on Reddit, the Dogecoin community was just kumbaya, super wholesome, people tipping each other nonstop, just really generous with their money and their knowledge. Onboarding people without a second thought, not judging, not for asking basic questions and stuff. These days, if you look at the Dogecoin subreddit, you'll have a bunch of people that hate on Elon there. It's just Elon haters and Dogecoin haters. So yeah, what do you think?
Subreddit, the Litecoin subreddit,
the Dogecoin. No. I think that the Litecoin subreddit's pretty quiet. I feel like most Litecoiners are on X. You get like a fraction of the traffic and activity on Reddit as you do on X, right? With the whole Litecoin thing. As is the case with most crypto stuff and even Dogecoin, right? But yeah, so what are your thoughts on Dogecoin? How do you feel about it taking a part of Litecoin's pie?
I think it definitely can take a share of the speculative capital that enters the space, just like meme coins have taken a percentage of interest that otherwise would have gone into maybe Bitcoin. I think the same effect is happening for the whole cryptocurrency space in general. They're all competing for this speculative capital, but I try to look at the network adoption statistics and kind of just take away or ignore the ticker. And despite Dogecoin's like rise to fame in a sense and everyone knowing what it is, it didn't result in much increase in transaction activity. Yeah, it's doing a lot of transactions now in like the ordinals, rune stuff, but it's doing very, very little real economic volume. I think the median transaction values for Doge are like in the cents, and it's doing like 70,000 transactions a day. But this is where I would kind of agree with some of the maximalist concepts of network effects. I think the markets for monies tend to converge around one asset until there's some reason to switch. And usually, at least in Bitcoin, that's price, right? Like the price of transacting becomes prohibitively expensive for certain transactions. They use another chain, but that second chain, once it leads, will be used, and network effects will converge around that chain. And the same thing happens. Like if there's actually that much demand for Bitcoin, I think Dogecoin is a proof of work. It is a proof of work chain. It does have the same sort of value proposition, even though it's considered by some a meme coin. It's still got its own network. I just think, from my perspective, network effects, given Litecoin's lead, should converge around it for that, medium to low value transaction market for Bitcoin specific types of transactions. So yeah, it could do well in a bull market based on raw speculation, but I don't know if we'll have enough demand to warrant 3 Bitcoin type chains. Maybe in the far future, yes, but from what I'm seeing, despite all the price increases and hype, it really didn't get much
I and
adoption.
I agree with you 100%. Like if you like from that perspective, right? If if usage enables the production of the assets, say like you compare Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. If more people are using Bitcoin, suddenly no one's going to want to produce Bitcoin Cash. Miners will capitulate and stop, right? But with Dogecoin and Litecoin and Bells, even if the chain isn't, being used, even if Litecoin or Bells stops being used and Dogecoin transaction volume just eclipses them, there's no reason for miners to stop mining Litecoin or Bells, right? Like they will exist no matter what. There's the incentives are still there for them to mine it, even if the value uh, isn't as strong as Dogecoin's.
Mhm.
And that's the
For
part
sure.
that really like I don't want to say I struggle to wrap my head around because I just like it just is, it's like it's a different mindset. It's a cooperative mindset. And I feel like which is why like I feel like a Litecoin ETF is kind of silly. Um not for reasons like political reasons or like the fact that we don't need the approval of the banks or anything to have this ETF package for us to invest in, right? But because I feel like a more appropriate ETF would be like a script ETF, basically commoditizing the script miners and what they're producing. And from my point of view, that just it's more of a logical like they're just they are they are together. They're produced at the same instance by the same people. Um, and as a commodity, they're intertwined. Um,
Yeah, for sure. I think the incentives are going to flip almost 180 in the future from where they are now. I think the incentives through merge mining, yeah, you can merge mine all these chains at no extra cost, and there's an incentive for miners to mine these low value chains and hold on to them, like Bell's Coin now. Much easier to pump the price. Like if you get some interest, speculative interest in a small value chain, because it's so thinly traded, it can move up a ton very quickly, and so it's not costing you anything. You might as well just hold on to it in case it does garner this hype wave. But in the far future, I think because of network effects and people tend to converge around one money, and in blockchains it's different. It will be a few. At some point, be like a clear winner. And if you're mining the coin that's kind of falling in network and adoption, given that there's not enough demand, they'll just sell off the byproduct or the merge mine coins that don't have this monetary adoption, because the idea is that that will just get worse over time. And so you'll just sell it until basically the other chains. And maybe that never happens. Maybe there is a situation where you have like 5 competing chains and they all trade at various different prices. But I think once the speculation and potential for like 100x pump in a really small chain is like impossible in investors' minds, then you'll just see miners mine it but sell it like immediately for the use this money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tend to think there is some correlation to them, but I try not to put too much weight in this fact that like they're merge mined. I think it's important. It's helpful that they secure each other. It creates a balance and like an income stream for the miners, but the market doesn't care. So the market's just, which is why like we can look at Dogecoin technically and go, okay, it's got this infinite amount of coins and there's 120 billion of them and the market cap seems insane versus real use case. Doesn't matter. That's not why people are in it. And value is determined by the buyer of that thing. So like whenever people are going, oh man, Doge is stealing the thunder of Litecoin. It's like, it's not like people are going to the market and going, well, they're merge mined and I'm going to buy one of them. I'll buy Doge and sell Litecoin. They're just buying Doge as Doge. They don't, it exists solely independent in their minds. And if you want, like Doge is taking money away from every chain when you look at it that way, right? People are choosing to put their money in one place.
Mhm.
And so it's an all or nothing. You can't divide up, can't split a penny in half, right? I guess.
And ultimately, they're enriching the Litecoin ecosystem.
Yeah. Yep.
Even though the value of the coin itself isn't going up, the value of the network certainly is. Hash rate's increasing, despite the fact
Right.
that the price isn't, which is
Well,
not.
I think that at some point, like, I think this market is very difficult, is rampant, and people don't really have an understanding
Say
of
it again.
what
Say it
they're
again.
buying.
You might have to close that
Close
trading view again.
Well, right now, I think this market is pretty, really understand, just like you said, they don't have a reason really why they're buying something. Even my like normal friends in real life, they buying chains based on like YouTube recommendations or what their friends are buying. At this point, speculation has to be rooted in like some sense of reality, and at that point, whenever that does happen, I think you see the speculative capital rotate into the things that are likely to survive like long term, things that do have real utility. People think this market will forever be a casino and will forever pump and dump random chains, almost have the belief that utility doesn't even matter. But I would compare this to like the stock market, right? Like you're not going to buy some insanely overvalued tech stock if it has no promise for future growth. Right? People bet on Tesla or bet on some of these companies where they have like a real business plan to achieve, I don't know, fully autonomous driving and all these self-driving fleets of vehicles that will then make its market cap X price, right? It's like it's rooted in some sense of reality where they're speculating on a future scenario where this company like totally dominates and it justifies the current price. Whereas in crypto, I don't think that really happens, or at least people have a misunderstanding as to how this market's going to develop. And so at some point, I think this cycle, I think the narrative for Bitcoin being this global money that will totally eclipse all of their monies in the $150 trillion money market is going to be proven untrue. There's just so many fallacies in Michael Saylor type of thesis where it's going to 13 million, but there's a lot of people that believe it. So at least it's rooted in some sense of justification. But
Collective
as
delusion.
these narratives,
yeah,
collective delusion, as these things get proven untrue, that capital in crypto will rotate into, actual truth, right? Where this market is actually going. And we're all speculating. We all have our various opinions, but I think there are provable realities and provable fallacies right now in the whole crypto space that we know for sure to be proven untrue. And the main one that I'm speculating on is Bitcoin's monetization limit. I think we'll reach that, and if fees do go to $100 to $1,000 this cycle, I think you'll like it's kind of it'll be a stark reality. It even kind of happened with all the Lightning Network people earlier this cycle, where fees rose on Lightning Network such that people gave up on it. There's some popular, that football player, NFL player that was super into Bitcoin.
Yeah, Russell Okung. Yeah,
he kind of completely gave up and capitulated and said like this is not a solution. So in my head,
he's on the street, right? He's out in Africa. I think
Yeah, he was
he was out
promoting it.
building something in Africa. Yeah.
You've seen this story happen so many times, right? Where people try to get people to adopt Bitcoin on the street in these countries, and then they get priced out, and it's almost like they just wasted their time. Well, they believed in the narrative that all the Bitcoin salesmen were telling them, that there would be no trade-offs for a credit layer, that there would be infinite scaling of Bitcoin as technology improved, but it's just not possible. And so,
It hasn't
Well,
materialized yet.
you mentioned Tesla and like stocks, and one of the things that's unique about this space, again, that people don't understand is Tesla can own some proprietary information, right? They can develop something on their car. Maybe maybe the software for self-driving they develop, and then they can sell that off to other companies to use in their cars. They have customer bases that they can access for a variety of different services, like, monthly subscription fees. And like there's revenue streams that can be developed because of that protective nature of what they have. But what always amazes me is that people don't understand, like, Bitcoin doesn't have a proprietary access to anything. Like, they don't have the ability to force people to use their coin. And so everyone's like, well, it'll be the only money. It's like, that's just not logical. That's not how people operate. And when you say that, like, you talk about swallowing the world's wealth or whatever it is, and it's like, well, okay, if you're willing to say at some point in time, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin for a house, what you're saying is I would prefer the house over the Bitcoin in that scenario, right? So how many millions of people are going to have that same thought process? Or I prefer this utility over this utility. Like, I prefer the dryness of a roof over my head over the speculating value of this Bitcoin. So I'm making a choice. And the people make that choice billions of times around the world every day about what they prefer to hold or what's giving them the most utility at the time. And so they are not, there's no government in the world that's going to prevent people from just using a better option, a less costly, faster, easier option. And so you don't, they've living under this impression that there's some sort of, I don't know, outside force that's going to make people magically ignore value, right?
for sure, well, money, at least in the digital, it doesn't have any use value. The only use for it is to spend it. Other money is like dollars, you could burn them for heat, or gold, you can wear them as jewelry, right? It's
Yeah, there
as
you
a
go.
social cultural value. But Bitcoin has nothing other than the ability to spend it. That's it's money at its core.
Well,
And
censorship resistant,
yeah,
immutable money, right? Trustless
for sure.
money, which has its value. Like the distributed ledger, I think that's something that, as an instrument of finance, it removes a lot of unnecessary layers that we deal with today.
You can also
And
argue that it's,
that goes back to, like, once you start incorporating those layers back in, then what are we even doing? You know what I'm saying?
No, exactly. Well, I would agree with the Bitcoin maximalists if it was scalable, if it could, you know, onboard the entire world to its network and still remain decentralized and provide censorship resistance and inflation resistance, right? Then I would agree, like, monetary network effects would make all of their monies, converge into one. But that's just not the way a decentralized network works. It costs more the more people that want to use it. And so you need multiple chains if demand for decentralized money is high enough. And so, yeah, I think these narratives will definitely be proven to be untrue at some point. It's just what really Bitcoin is competing for are network effects. And I think a lot of Bitcoin maximalists realize that. And then because I think realize there is competition, why they turn to the government to try to establish a monopoly, so that they limit competition. That's why you see everyone online like arguing about it, because they know they have to convince people to buy their coin so that they can get rich. But they're at odds with market forces that will naturally, stop using it once it becomes too expensive. I don't think that's such a hard concept to understand in other goods and services, right? Like, if the price of Pepsi goes up 10 times higher than the price of Coke, people will buy Coke until they reach a similar price. It's just never happened in money before. They look at historical examples of like gold. Okay, yeah, the whole world used gold at one point, because it
Well,
didn't
and that's not
cost
true.
more. Not
A
not
lot of
100% true, but
a lot of the world, and most of it was done by government edict.
sure, but like
You know what I'm saying?
regardless, it didn't have the same effect. Like you could have as many people using gold as you wanted to, or silver, without incurring cost on everyone else that's using that same money. So it
Right.
was much more scalable, but it's not natively digital. It doesn't work in this information based economy, and
The price was also stable. It's kind of crazy, but you could
that's
get. I'm
another thing
assuming.
too.
Yeah. Go
Price
ahead.
stability is a function of most commodities in the world. All market based commodities have this price stability function where if the price increases, you get an incentive to do more of whatever that underlying commodity is. And then you get supply on the market that pushes price down, such that purchasing power for gold remains stable over time. But Bitcoin has the exact same thing. It just doesn't happen on the supply side, so it confuses people. Instead of getting more supply issued onto the market as price goes up, you can't mine more of it, right? But you have the negative feedback loop on the demand side, where as demand increases, you price out lower value transactions. And we were talking before about how Bitcoin's not really used for much. It's to me, it makes sense that you're just seeing higher and higher average value transactions happening on Bitcoin. It's still moving like $8 to $20 billion on chain a day, even though 30% are runes and ordinals transactions. And you should see the market gravitate towards that, where they're thinking cautiously about when to use the chain and when not to. And it can keep moving up in these higher average value transactions, but eventually at some point, because there are way more lower value transactions, mid value transactions in the economy than high value transactions, you reach this monetization limit where it can't increase anymore, right? You could keep going up the higher average value transactions, but at some point you lose a proportional amount of value on the low value or mid value side. And then another chain can get right up to Bitcoin's market cap, by taking all of the market share priced out of the first Bitcoin chain, or close to that point. If we
Right.
see a fee level of $1,000 or $500, most Bitcoin transactions today that make up the vast majority of its economic monetization part of the chain are between $1,000 and $10,000. That demand will be forced elsewhere as soon as fees price them out, and all of that demand can be ported to Litecoin overnight. And that's like
Mhm.
the speculative thesis around this.
In about 10 to 20 minutes, it
Yeah,
can change.
in a
Right.
very
Yep.
short amount of time, and it's happened historically. Every single time Bitcoin feeds it grows, it's gained a ton of transactions. By far outcompetes every other chain, even stable coins. There's this narrative that we have so many more competing blockchains. Like Litecoin's so old, nobody's going to use it. But that's just because people look at the price charts. If they knew that Litecoin is still doing this and is the primary beneficiary of high Bitcoin fees, they wouldn't have that view. It's just because we're only monetizing like $50 transactions right now that it's not enough to push up price, especially when miners are selling. So 7 years, they have no coins to sell. If you get import, 20x the average value size for Litecoin, the price will go up 20x like overnight, and then people will realize the narrative that's actually in line with reality, and that's how you can see this crazy move in price that I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm thinking like I almost want to go back into that. So 33's holy crap. So I think $2.3 billion worth of Litecoins what those miners have sold. Dang, that almost doesn't seem real.
Yeah, and honestly, the more absorption at lower prices, the
Wow.
higher the rebound time frame. Because a lot of the market that absorbed these coins at these relatively low prices are less likely to sell than the miners at any price. So if price starts moving up, it has this like positive feedback loop of momentum. Like if nobody's selling, it's just like a meme coin, right? Nobody sells originally, they'll pre-mine it, they pump it until it gets to a certain price, then they distribute their coins. you'll see the same effect with Litecoin should this happen. There'll be like very limited sellers into demand that's never come to the chain before. And because you have speculative demand at all-time lows in history, right? Because it hasn't performed, it leaves the most growth for speculative activity to return to Litecoin. And it's available everywhere, like you said before. Anyone in the world can buy it. This is a global market. It's most accessible behind Bitcoin. So should it get some sort of price breakout before, it could develop into maybe one of the most rallies that we've ever seen in crypto history.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy to me how inefficient this market is. Like how you can sell fallacies to such a large amount of people, promoted all over TV, around Bitcoin only.
Nobody checks it. Not a single person on CNBC or whatever goes, well, why aren't people using it? No one's looking at the data and saying, hey, well, transactions aren't changing. So like why, like all these Lightning businesses are going out of business. Why is that? There's no challenging it at all, which is
It's almost as if like it's fake news.
They're invested.
Well, they all own it, I think. Yeah, they all own it and want to pump it. But it's like a government when they try to maintain a currency peg. Like you can pull all the fake news you want. Market forces tend to overcome them, and when they do, it's usually a dramatic, violent move, because once that narrative dies, people lose hope. They all realize it at the same time. It's like COVID shortage of goods or toilet paper, right? It will happen instantaneously. It's like George Soros made all his money, right? Like shorting government currency. He knew it would break, and he made billions of dollars because the move out of that was so violent. Like once they lost control of the narrative, it was over.
Yep. Yeah, well, then that is like one of my, if I were to sit here and give you like the scariest scenario, it is that you run to it doesn't even have to be a dramatic dump. I think I mentioned this the other day where it's like, let's say after the next 2 years, price is $60,000 or it's 52, right? It just keeps slowly bleeding. And yeah, Saylor eventually has to go, you know what? Maybe this isn't whatever. The board of directors is telling me to do X and Y, and I've got to service some debt and the business hasn't been doing well. They start selling, their stock starts, like MSTR stock starts dumping. We lost him again. And there's this like cascading effect in the opposite direction because it is all purely speculation, that it can unwind in a similar way that it's wound up. I don't think that's happening. I think there's enough institutional like investment. There's enough dollars out there that people have committed to this. I mean, gosh, I got in a little tiff with the LightSpark guy, that David Marcus guy yesterday. I gave him some shit. His company got $175 million to build a Lightning node, basically. A company to deposit your Bitcoin and use for transactions. And I think it's a Bitcoin only wallet. And I'm thinking $175 million. Why wouldn't you just go, if you really believe in Bitcoin, just go buy Bitcoin with your $175 million? Why would you do that, right?
I don't understand the logic behind this because one, it's a like custodial solution for Lightning Network, and the value proposition of Bitcoin can get regulated out of existence. You don't have any privacy when you're using Lightning custodian, right? They can demand all the KYC information. There's no real advantage to using that. I think they're chasing a market that won't ever exist. Materialize. And 175 million is crazy. Like look at MWeb adoption or VPM adoption versus Lightning Network. There's like 4 times as much of the circulating supply of Litecoin in MWeb than there is Bitcoin on Lightning Network. And it had zero marketing, really. So the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like marketing and producing Lightning Network.
Sorry, go ahead. I keep cutting you off.
Oh, you're
I was gonna
good.
say, like,
but it's
the bet we're making, I guess, when you think about it, is that we are believers that people will choose to recognize the part of this that's about sovereignty, and that you either believe that that's an important part of this or you don't. And if you don't, then you should probably buy Bitcoin and put your money into Strike and just ride the wave, right? But if you believe that that's an important part of it, that's what some of these other coins are going to do. I got a visitor here. Hang on.
Well, I think it's not only that though. It's already happening. Like the process of monetization is already happening for Litecoin over Bitcoin for obvious reasons to me. You're just betting that it'll continue and that eventually the market will transition its speculative capital out of Bitcoin to more in line with reality. And yeah, you're also, if you're betting on Bitcoin, I think you're betting that way too, to some extent. Unless you're just betting on history, what happened with gold, right? Where governments took control of it and gold was pseudo monetized and then demonetized.
More
You could
importantly,
bet
silver was
on,
demonetized, right?
yeah, both of them. If you're betting on governments like controlling their people and we're entering this crazy world where we have no freedom, then maybe just, yeah, Bitcoin only, and hopefully all the governments around the world adopt it and control you within the white market Bitcoin ecosystem.
And give up all their money printing capabilities and taxation.
Or you're betting on, yeah, technology
You bet that
adoption.
they're going to do the same thing they've done over and over again.
Do you think Bitcoin is suitable for that? Like, do you feel that it can serve as a, reserve currency?
I think the reserve currency concept is sort of a fallacy as well. I don't know how more people don't see this, but a reserve implies an institution or government holds all the money and they issue you paper receipts against that money, and then you trust them to maintain the peg and not inflate the supply, because you don't really have any protection against that inflation unless you're actually demanding your money and taking possession of it, because they can create as many paper receipts as they want against gold, silver, or Bitcoin, right? They did it with gold, and that's why gold became demonetized and they had to go off the gold standard.
You heard,
Uh,
but you
because
heard about BlackRock, right? Sorry to interrupt, but you heard about BlackRock this week saying that they would demand custody of their coins from Coinbase to be able
Yep.
to have, I guess, to have evidence that they're holding the coins and they're not just, using them to trade or, inflate the value of the tokens or deflate it or whatever.
Yeah, basically a check on Coinbase's solvency.
So yeah, and so that's, but I mean, so the fact that BlackRock is doing this is because they heard the complaints of the community, uh, particularly towards like the ETF packages, right? And how they're just like paper traded commodities, which are historically easy to manipulate and less trusted than physical assets. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, if this trend continues, if this sovereignty trend continues, do you think it's? I mean, do you think they'll still be issuing paper like if say Trump gets elected and they do fall through with his plan to create a national reserve of Bitcoin? You don't think it's going to be auditable? You don't think we're going to be able to see the address and know for sure how much value there is there at every second?
well, that's the problem I always had with proof of reserves, because exchanges already kind of do this. The government could implement the same system, but you're trusting the auditor and you're trusting, in this case, the government, to be honest. And even if it's Trump, yeah, maybe.
Like Binance and Kraken use like a Merkle tree to do this, right? So you can put in your I don't know what it is, like an address of that you generate from your own account, right? This Merkle proof, and then you put it into their, I guess it's a front end website, insert it, and then it does the math behind the scenes, and you're able to verify that your coins are still being held there.
What's the purpose of the reserve? That's what I don't understand.
Well,
The Bitcoin reserve
Like
for the
what would be the purpose?
to enrich the U.S. government.
How so?
I guess the case is that, yeah, if this currency was really going to be the new like global standard, adopting it before other countries would result in price increase for the early adopters. So I guess to that extent, if that's what you believe, it would enrich whoever adopts it first. But I don't know. I think that's the case, right?
That's assuming there's
I,
other people there to buy it. That's assuming that other
Yeah.
countries are just going to get on board and not
that's
say,
the
well,
thing,
we're doing the
right?
same thing with our own money, or like, you know, we're going to stick with gold, or because what we do is that if you take that cash that you create out of thin air and go to a market and buy gold, you're making a choice, right? You're opting, I'm sorry, buy Bitcoin. You're opting to not buy gold. You're opting to not buy silver. You're opting to not invest in infrastructure or whatever it is, your people, whatever else you could have done with that money. You're taking money from your taxpayers to just buy this thing that doesn't create any value for anybody. Right?
And I
For
mean, it's
sure.
also assuming that this is the hardest money on the planet, that it can't be debased, that it can't be attacked, which
Well,
I disagree with. But yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. I think the whole proof of reserves concept, even though you have a Merkle tree, you'd have to have like a constant like minute by minute update, because these coins are traded around on their exchange. People withdraw coins. They're using your coins in hot wallets and maybe putting some in cold storage. You
Yeah.
wouldn't know if they were insolvent just because of proof of reserves, unless it was real time updating every second.
I think it's pretty. I think it is pretty accurate. As far as I know, I did it once on one of the exchanges, and it's pretty cool. I was impressed.
Wait, yeah,
Uh,
you can check it, but what I'm saying is that um, if you compare it to what happened with gold, and say you could have the same thing with gold, if everyone's just using the paper credit claims as one-to-one with the money, and that's how we trade it, eventually this thing circulating as money is the claim, the credit claim to the underlying money, and it becomes so hard to verify that all those credit claims are backed one-to-one with the
yeah,
money.
the thing you don't
It's
know,
hard for
Animal,
them to track M2 right now. They just have estimates of like how much credit's circulating
yeah,
around the
money
economy.
supply.
what it
Yeah.
is you don't know how much they've sold. You may know how much they're holding, but you don't know how much their account holders supposedly have on paper, right? So I've said this about the ETFs. Everyone's like, well, you should be able to track the reserves. Well, BlackRock could say, yeah, okay, we got 1 million Bitcoin. Coinbase audits it. Yes, there's 1 million Bitcoin. You can look on online. There's 1 million Bitcoin. But meanwhile, they've sold $2 million worth of Bitcoin to their customers, which is an internal spreadsheet that you and I will never have access to. You don't know what they've sold to people. And granted, ideally, you'd like to think there's a government auditing this and there's some sort of regulation around it that prevents it. But as we've seen, as you saw in 2008, government regulators can be paid off, right? They look the other way, or they're just ignorant of what's going on. They can be basically duped.
Yeah.
And there's, I think I kind of want to talk about the Swan thing, but I feel like we should say that for another time. But uh, another, they're another victim of uh, being a believer so deeply that price goes up forever that they put themselves out of business.
Well, so
You know what I
I'm not
mean?
familiar with the Swan thing. I don't follow them. I don't think they're available in Canada. Maybe that's why they're just not on my radar.
Oh, well, they were the biggest maxis in the world. They're now going through some lawsuits. Everybody quit back in July, and it sounds like it's all falling apart basically. But
Nice.
no one knows. You don't know how much is in reserve. You don't know if you're ever going to have access to those coins. If somebody internally, the sky is falling, and they decided to just, take off with funds, with user funds. I don't know. There's a lot of trust involved.
For sure. And yeah, given the state of the world, we have declining trust in institutions and governments. I don't think they can miraculously save that, given the financial state and health. They have to come up with tax revenue somehow. Um, and inflating the money supply is the easiest thing. Even if they move to a Bitcoin standard, it's not going to change anything. Really, Bitcoin to me and Litecoin allow individuals to not have to pay the tax that governments are going to be forced to incur on the population through inflation. It's like if they adopt it now and they start circulating in their own economies, trading peer to peer and not obeying the rules, then they can avoid that tax that will be forced on everyone else. But you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
do it through a government. right? They're the ones that won't need to tax you. They're not going to disproportionately benefit Bitcoin holders. Everyone else would be super pissed at that idea, right? It's like if they choose to have a Bitcoin standard and keep it 1-to-1 and tax other people way more, then they're just letting Bitcoiners get away, like taking a larger share of like the public trough in a sense.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, because it's obviously what they've done with Wall Street, right? The disproportionate amount of money that comes from the Fed ends up in the stock market. So it's enriched the rich at the expense of the poor. So this isn't new practice for them. But I just think that because of the optics of it, and because it's one individual entity, I don't think that they would do it. But I don't think long term it'd be a good thing. I think most people would be like, oh, well, crap, now it's this captured coin. They would just, again, they're going to be like, how much more can happen? Like, all the narratives are completely gone at that point in time. You know what I'm saying? There's no upside anymore. The U.S. government's
That's why I think this is the last speculative mania, because you don't have a larger group of people to put in capital for speculative reasons to buy it. So then eventually it has to live off its monetary adoption price.
So you think it's
right.
like Bitcoin's make it or break it moment?
I think it's going to be it will be like a make it moment short term where price goes up a lot, but then the subsequent following bear market will be the worst in history, because I think you've seen the climax of speculative mania that you can see. You can't get any bigger than the U.S. government narrative. We're the U.S.'s wealthiest country in the world. So who's gonna bail out all these people that bought in from that hype? Nobody.
Yeah, because let's say price goes to $200,000, government buys it, it triples in value, everyone's super hyped up, and it's like, okay, well then somebody behind you has to plunk down $200,000. You know what I'm saying? Once they've all bought, then you're sitting there, the market's there, and it's like, okay, well, we just unnaturally shifted this market completely inorganic adoption.
And it'll change the way like our exports are valued too, right? Like our exports will be priced out of the range of, the countries buying them, because it'll increase the value of the dollar, right? And increase inflation elsewhere.
No, you'd be reducing the value of the dollar versus Bitcoin.
Well, you'll increase the strength
for a certain subset of people, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm assuming that it'll be like the dollar will be pegged to Bitcoin's price at some point. Yeah, you're right though. It would be deflating the price of the dollar, but somehow increasing the strength of US commodities.
Yeah, if somewhere they came along and said, we're going to buy this amount of Bitcoin, we're going to buy 5 million Bitcoin, and then a penny is going to be a Satoshi. And you must use Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to be paid in Bitcoin, and you're going to have to use a bank, and there's no more cash. Like, that's the only way you do it. Absolute authoritarian
on Lightning
mania.
Too. Yeah, it'll have to be done on Lightning.
Yeah, right. You could have paper Bitcoin. Then you go back to like, do you have paper Bitcoin? Because it's the cheapest, fastest way to do it, which is all Strike is. It's all Lightning is. And then you're back to where you were. Absolutely square one again. Except now
you don't need to open a new bank account. You don't need to open another account with another bank. They'll probably just allow you to create a Bitcoin savings account or checkings account.
Right. The central bank. It's a central bank digital currency at that point, right?
Yeah. Your Chase, Wells Fargo, they're just going to be, like Lightning service providers, right? They're going to be giant hubs and spokes.
Yeah.
And we're back to where we started.
That's why I think I always, from the longest point, and my view is getting more popular now, but I've always separated white market and black market activity. I just don't think there's a value proposition for Bitcoin or a lot of these cryptocurrencies in the white market. Even with Monero or super fancy cryptography that delinks transactions, in the white market, you still have no privacy, even if you're using Monero. They can demand whatever history of where you got the money that they want, and you have to provide that or you can't use it. So this next bear market, I do think you'll see that realized as well. That this stuff, for what it's promoted for, censorship resistance and protection from inflation, does not exist in the white market unless the government allows it to. And people think it's so popular that the government will allow it to, but to me, they need to tax, and usually what's most popular is what's most heavily regulated, right? If it wasn't popular at all, the government doesn't care about it. So that'll be interesting to see how the community in crypto, changes over time. And maybe some people that bought it under false pretenses will end up selling once that's realized.
Yeah. All right. We get, as usual, we start pushing up against this 2-hour number. I want to probably cut it short because I could go on that, what you just said a little bit too. We could talk all day. Well, so, hey man, thanks for coming. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and follow Litecoin at Litecoin on Twitter. He's the OG with myself of the Litecoin Underground. And yeah, good, interesting information, I guess. And now you're getting into creating AI images and posting them. You're becoming the Michael Saylor of Litecoin, which is exciting. I'm expecting you to deploy billions soon.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Yeah, sorry this connection. I don't know if it was my fault or what happened, but I wish.
No, don't worry about it. It happens. But as you know, like we mentioned earlier, when you left, we talked about Cake Wallet, but go check out Cake Wallet. I think they're going to be adding MWeb. I got to get some firm dates on here, but I'm going to guess everybody's focusing on the 13th birthday coming up here in a couple weeks. Hopefully we'll have 1 or 2 MWeb enabled wallets that are fully fleshed out and working. But also, hopefully, it works well. We don't want to rush it if it's wrong. But go check them out. Download it if you just to support us. I think it's the best way to do it. Go use Cake Wallet. Buy gift cards on it. There's like Nano GPT on there if you want to use Chat GPT inside the wallet itself, which is pretty cool. And yeah, thanks for listening every week. And I think we'll try to do this every week. Every Saturday morning, we'll call it, I guess, Saturday Morning Underground for now. But anything to add, Animal, or why before we leave, Animal?
I mean, no, just yeah. Also, check out Kyle's shirt. He made this great script shirt for me.
84 million club. Is that what it's called?
84 million. Yeah. LTC, Bell, and Doge in order of their inception. And yeah, Kyle's been great. Super nice guy. And the quality of the shirt's very good.
84 million in words, not numbers.
Yes.
84million.com.
I'll send you the link so we can post it in the Twitter thing. I already did, but here we go.
Anything you want to say before we go? Why?
I think I'm good. Next time, I think if we ever do this again, we figure out the connection stuff and make it a little more structured. But yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, right. Dude, it's always a pleasure speaking to you Wednesdays as well. I mean, you come in there and you definitely challenge my views, and I appreciate that immensely.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think
he doesn't get that. He doesn't get that out of me, is what he's saying.
No, you do. But I mean, like, Litecoin's got all this data, and I feel like he's an economist in another life. I don't know. Something tells me he works in finance, just by his vocabulary, and yeah.
That's true. But yeah, sorry for being a dick if I am sometimes. I just have strong opinions, and I like to be challenged as well.
For sure, dude. Don't worry about it. You're all good.
Don't ever change.
All right, sounds good. We're gonna go to the moon now. It's time.
All right. Well, I'm gonna click end here. Why?
All right.
It's just gonna end, but it doesn't mean you have to leave. All right. It's just gonna close the session. I just gotta tell people. Everything is falling apart in my house today. Did you hear earlier? A mirror fell, and now something's thrown down the stairs at me. All right. Okay, guys. Bye. Thanks. Come back next week. And thanks for following. Like and subscribe, that type of stuff.